In this video we're going to go over the Chapter 8 exercise, group exercise, where we are trying to resolve a transition between templates. You can see we have a curb and gutter section here, and then we have a shoulder section here, and we're going to try to create a transition between the two templates, and we're going to do this on the left side of Road 1. Now what we're going to use mainly in this exercise is parametric constraints, and to understand the hierarchy of how points react, the point constraint that you define in the template is the lowest level of control. Basically, you have typically you have two constraints, and then those constraints tell the point how to react to other points in the template. Above that is something called a parametric constraint. Okay, and a parametric constraint, you have a label down here. For example, this horizontal distance here, you typically have a label that you can control that distance based on a station range. And then above that you have something called a feature constraint that would override the parametric constraint and also override the point constraint. And with that is you're targeting some plan graphic, and with that you have to have this checked on, and you have to have that feature defined in this field here for that plan graphic. And then the highest level of control is a point control, and that will override a feature constraint, a parametric constraint, or a point constraint. And so that is the highest level of control, and typically an example of a point control is super elevation. Super elevation is a point control that overrides any kind of vertical information. And so in this example we're going to use a lot of parametric constraints, and then later on we're going to show you how the feature constraint overrides both the parametric constraint that we set up and the point constraint. So let's go on down here, and the first thing it says is open up the corridors file, so we'll go ahead and do that. And so again, here is the issue that we're going to try to resolve. This is the left side of the Road 1 pavement, and we're going to try to transition this curb and gutter out to the edge of shoulder here, and we're going to do those steps again with a parametric constraint. And so it says in step number 2, it says click on the Road 1 template drop handlers for the range of 0 plus 0, 0 to 25 plus 30, and that's basically this template grip right here. You can see the station value, but if you zoom out you can see that it goes all the way back to station 0 plus 0, 0. And so we're gonna edit that template, and so that's why we're clicking on it. And so we're just gonna bring up the tools for it and go to the edit template drop. Now one thing you got to realize when you do this is you're editing the template that's stored in the DGN. You're not modifying the template in the ITL, but you're editing the template in the DGN. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on that, and it brings this up. And when you edit templates in the DGN, it really doesn't matter what this is pointing to. Right now it's pointing to the mode.itl, but we're not really affecting the mode.itl. We are affecting the template that's stored in the DGN. Okay. Alright, so we've got that opened up, and it says review the point properties dialog for the left curb surface flow line point. And in the, I believe it was chapter 6, we went in and we modified this point here. We actually did both the left and the right. So we're going to look at the left one. And in this one we have a slope constraint 7.41%, so that's good. And we also have a label here that we can use with the parametric constraint tool to adjust that slope over a station range, and that's what we're going to do here in step number 4. So we can go ahead and close this down. This all looks good, and we're going to hit OK to that. And to apply a parametric constraint, and what we're going to do first here is we're going to try to change that slope value, because if we look at this slope, and I'm going to try to use my view rotation tool in view number 2, and again you got to make this active before you can do this. I'm going to try to snap right onto the end of that curb there, and I'm going to rotate it around. You can see that this slope is a lot higher. It's 2%, where this one's a 7.41%, and so what we're going to do is try to kick that slope up to match the shoulder slope. And again, we're going to do that with a parametric constraint. So we're going to go over to the Road 1 corridor and grab onto the corridor grip. We're going to go over to the corridor creation tools. We're going to go down to the icon with the big question mark. corridor creation tools, and then slide down to this icon right here, create parametric constraint. Okay. And first thing it's going to ask for is, where do you want to start this this parametric constraint at? And we're going to start at 24 plus 80. So we're going to accept that, and we're going to go down to 25 plus 30. That's where our curb and gutter ends. We got to accept that. Now we need to tell it the constraint label. And so I'm just going to come over to the dialog, and I'm going to look for that. Maybe I can keep it open here. I'm going to look for that left curb surface, or left gutter slope. That's what it's called, left gutter slope. And so it's that one right there. And you can see it puts in the default values in there. And so we're going to do the left gutter slope. We're going to start at the normal slope that's defined in the template, but then we're going to change it to a 2% slope at the end at station 25 plus 30. So it's going to transition from the 7.41 to a 2% slope at the end. And so all I got to do is left click to accept that, and you can see in my 3D view that that curb is going to kick up and match the shoulder slope. Okay. All right, perfect. So that was step number 4. Now we're going to move on to the next section, and we're going to resolve the gutter width now with a parametric label. So what we need to do is we need to go into that template drop again and verify whether or not that width, the gutter width, has a label or not, parametric constraint label. So we're going to go edit that template again. We're on the left side one more time. This point controls the width of the gutter here. So we're going to go into there. You can see we got a horizontal distance, but we don't have a label. So we can literally type anything we want in there, but I'm going to go ahead and type what's in the manual here, left underscore gutter underscore width. Again, you can type any label in there. You might you just got to think. Normally you want to type a label in there that kind of makes sense with what you're trying to adjust. And so this is a gutter width, and so we're adjusting the left gutter. So once that's typed in there, all you got to do is hit apply and close. Hit OK to this. It'll update the template out in your DGN. And what we're going to do now is we're going to try to move that width out with a parametric constraint. So again, you just click on any old corridor grip for Road 1, go over to the corridor creation tools, slide down to create parametric constraints, and for this station range we're going to start off at 25 plus 20. So we'll do 25 plus 20. We're going to lock that in, and we're going to accept it. We're going to stop down at 25 plus 30. We're going to accept that. The constraint label is not left gutter slope, but we're going to go find our left, the one that we just typed in there, left gutter width. Left gutter width. And I'm having a little trouble finding it. Left, there it is right there, left gutter width. Again, once I pick that label, it puts in the default values, and we're gonna change leave the start value as is. So we're gonna accept the constraint label. We're gonna accept the start value. But the stop value we're gonna add a foot to it. So it's gonna be negative 3.25. Negative 3.25. I'm going to lock that in, and then I'm going to go ahead and accept it, and you'll see that my gutter will now kick out. And now my gutter, if I zoom out just a little bit over here, I'm going to hit F4 to get out of this parametric constraint tool. I'm going to make this view active by clicking in the banner. I'm going to rotate the view around just so we can see that the gutter is truly out even with the shoulder, and that's what we're wanting there. You can kind of see how it's transitioning over that 10-foot distance there as well. Alright. Now if you ask why did you pick a certain station range, and what we're trying to teach you guys here is just a procedure. Now the way you transition this curb and gutter out to shoulder, it's totally up to you. There's several different ways you can do it, but this is what we're doing, and we kind of just made up the distances. When we transition the width over 10 feet. You could do it over a greater length, 50, 100 feet, whatever you want to do, but we chose 10. Again, we're just trying to teach you a concept of transitioning using parametric constraints here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we got a berm width problem here. You know, the fill slope coming off the shoulder has no berm, but behind the curb and gutter we have a berm width here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to transition that width over a distance where it just disappears down to nothing there. So I'm going to try to just move this down so we can see that a little bit better. And so again, what we need to do is we need to check and see if that berm width value in the template has a label, and if it does, we can then use a parametric constraint. So I'm just going to do this left berm point. This is the point that defines how wide the berm is. So I just double click on that. There's the horizontal distance. It's 6 foot wide, and we do have a label, so we're going to go ahead and use that one there. So we don't have to make any changes to the template library to adjust that berm width. So I'm going to come in here to the corridor grip again. I'm going to slide over to the corridor creation tools, go down to create parametric constraint. Okay, it's asking for a start distance, and for this one I'm going to, and this is in step number 7, I'm going to use 24 plus 80. I'm going to lock that in. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to go down to 25 plus 30 because that's where my curb and gutter ends. The constraint label, I need to go find that left berm width, and there it is right there, left berm width. You can see the default values, so I'm going to go ahead and accept the constraint value, the start value. Now the end value I'm going to make 0, and I'm going to accept it. And you can see my berm transition down to 0. Okay. Alright, so we're getting closer, but now we got a problem here. If we go back to this view here, you can see that my berm and my fill slope is really being kind of controlled. And let me see if I can find where my crosshair is. There it is. I'm going to zoom in there, and I'm going to slide this up a little bit. You can see that my fill elevation is higher. It's starting at the top of the curve, and I need to move that down to this location here. And so what we need to do is we need to go back and look at the template and see how that's created. And so I'm going to go into the template one more time. And again, I'm editing the template in the DGN, and it's basically this berm right here, and it's tied to that point. Now we got a problem though. This point here is part of the curve, and it's also part of the berm. And what I want to do is I want to move that berm down, and so what I have to do is I have to introduce a point that will control that and basically remove the berm from that point. And the reason I know that this point is part of the curve and the berm is if you double click on the point, you can see that it's a member of the left berm, which is that component right there, and it's also a member of the left curb and gutter type B, which is this curb and gutter. And the way it got there is because what happens is, let me place an element out here on the screen, and you'll kind of get a better idea. So I'm going to place, let's put a pavement out there. So let me go to pavement new. I'm just going to go to let's go to concrete, A2 shoulder. Wait, hold on here. Let's actually go down to pavement new. Let's go to pavement only. That's where I was wanting to go to. Concrete. I'm just going to put a pavement concrete out there, kind of like so. Okay. So it's its own component, and we've got a point here, and this point is part of the concrete pavement, right? So now if I drag something else out there, say let's drag an end condition, a fill slope, and we're just playing here, so don't worry about what I'm doing here. I'll delete it here in a second. If I drag that out there and I place it on that point, see there's a point that's part of the fill slope, but if I drag it out there and place it right on top of that concrete point, that point merges into that existing point. See that? And now if I double click on this point, you'll see that that point is now part of the concrete pavement, which it was before, but it's also now part of the fill slope. And so that's how this point on this backup curve became part of this berm and that concrete curve. It was always part of that concrete curve in the beginning, but then when we dragged a berm on top of it and snapped it on there, it then became part of the berm as well. So what we need to do is we need to break that berm off of that point, and that's what we're going to do in the next step. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and delete my components over here. Get rid of that. And the way you can break it off there is, I'm going to go insert a point here. Okay, I'm going to insert a point. And let's see what step this is here. Okay, step number 8. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on this berm line, and we're going to right click, and we're going to do an insert point. And you can see it's kind of rubber banding off of your cursor. And what you're going to do is you're just going to go over and place it right on top of that existing point. Okay, and it's going to keep on wanting to add points to this berm. So all you got to do is right click and finish. All right. So now we got 2 points here right on top of each other. One's part of the berm, and one's part of the berm and the curb, and the other one's just part of the berm by itself. In our next step, number 9, we're going to delete the original point out of the berm. And the way you do that is you right click on that and you select delete point. Because we have 2 points on top of each other, we have to tell it what point to delete. Now it does say, when we choose the option, it does say delete point, but we're not really deleting the point. We're deleting the point out of the berm. And so we're going to select the original point, and now it's asking, well, what do you want to delete it out of? And we're going to delete it out of the left berm. And so we're going to hit OK, and so that point still stays there, but it's not part of the berm anymore. And so to show you this, if I double click on that and then click on the left curved surface point, you can see that it's not part of the left berm anymore. It's only part of the curve. Okay. And so the next thing we need to do is we're going to double click on that newly placed point and select the DNC. And we're going to rename that point to give it some meaning. And so we're going to call it left berm T. So left underscore berm underscore T. Okay. And so we're going to hit apply to that. So we got a left berm T now. And now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a horizontal constraint. And the parent point is going to be that original point, because I want this berm to basically slide up and down this back of curb point, and we're going to adjust the height of it using a parametric constraint, but I want it to be floating or kind of constrained to the back of this curved surface. And so that's why I'm going to constrain it horizontally to that original point. And so I'm going to come down and I'm going to pick my horizontal constraint. My parent point is going to be that original point called left curved surface back, and the value is going to be 0. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply to that. And the next thing I want to do is I want that second constraint to be a vector offset of this point and that point. Okay, and if it's a vector offset, I can then control that height based on that vector offset. And so I'm going to go ahead and define my vector first. I'm going to pick this point first, and that point right there in the gutter area there. And so the vector is defined, and now that distance from that vector up to that point is 5.5540. Okay. And so the next thing I'm going to do, because I want to transition that height or that offset, I'm going to give it a label. And so then I can, once I give it a label, I can use a parametric constraint to control that offset. And so the label that I'm going to put in there is, I'm going to call it left berm elevation offset. I'm just going to type that in, left berm elevation underscore offset. So these labels that you type in here can pretty much be anything you want. And so I'm going to call that left berm elevation offset, and I'm going to give it apply, and I can go ahead and close that down. Okay. Now, one other thing we got to change before we can actually apply that. You know, this point will go up or down now, and this berm on the right side will follow it. But the problem is this left berm is still looking at the old point for its location. And so what I want this left point to do is I want that left point to be able to slide down along with this left berm point and not be tied to the old curb point. So I'm going to double click on this point here, and all I'm going to do is change the slope constraint to the new point that we just created, and it's called left berm T. Okay. If you want to, you could change the horizontal constraint as well. It really won't have any effect because the left curved surface back will always be the same location as the left berm T point horizontally, because that's how I tied that one to that point. So if you want to, you can update the parent to be the same as this one if you want. It's either way, it's whatever you want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply to that and close. So let's go ahead and see if it's going to work out in our drawing. We're going to hit OK to that. When we hit OK to that, it's really not going to change anything in our view out here because we didn't really change anything except setting it up to make the parametric constraint label to work. And so we're going to come over to our corridor grip, and you can pick any corridor grip along Road 1. We're going to go down to our creation tools. We're going to slide down to the create parametric constraint. So I'm going to ask where we want to start this at. We're going to do 24 plus 80, which is already set, so I'm going to accept that. We're going to go down to 25 plus 30, and now we're going to look for that new label that we just created, left berm elevation offset. You can see the default start value. We're going to keep that start value, and we're going to stop it down in an offset value of 0. So I'm going to enter that in, and I'm going to accept it. You should see our berm go down here, just like so. And so if I go back to this view, make it active, I click onto the view rotation, you can see how that transitions that berm over that distance. Okay. And so that's the steps to, at least our steps, to transition from a curb and gutter to a shoulder section. We could have, in this example, we transitioned the curb and gutter out, but we could have went to the shoulder section and transitioned that in to match the curb and gutter, and also change the slope of the shoulder. But again, you can transition any which way you want. Again, we're just trying to teach you a procedure on how to do this. So that's all there is for this exercise, and we're going to move on to the individual exercise next.